The Cleveland Browns just pulled off one of the most dramatic behind-the-scenes pivots in recent NFL history, and Shedeur Sanders, the fifth-round quarterback who was supposed to be nothing more than a developmental project, is suddenly sitting in the driver's seat for the 2026 starting job. While General Manager Andrew Berry publicly played it safe, refusing to commit to anyone, insider reports are now painting a completely different picture. Sources are revealing that the Browns are actively preparing for Sanders to be their Week 1 starter next season, and this stunning shift is sending shockwaves through the league. How did a rookie who completed just over 56% of his passes and threw more interceptions than touchdowns become the frontrunner? What changed, and why are some of the NFL's top coaching candidates potentially avoiding Cleveland because of this decision? Before we break down this massive development and reveal exactly why the Browns are suddenly all in on Shedeur Sanders, despite what Andrew Berry said publicly, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this story is evolving rapidly, and you don't want to miss a single update as Cleveland navigates one of the most fascinating quarterback situations in the NFL.
Let's pull back the curtain on what's really happening in Cleveland, because on the surface, Andrew Berry's comments on Monday, January 5, 2026, sounded like business as usual. The Browns had just fired head coach Kevin Stefanski after a disastrous 5-12 season, and Berry held a press conference to address the organization's direction. When asked about Shedeur Sanders and the quarterback position, Berry gave what appeared to be a very measured, non-committal answer. He praised Sanders' progress, acknowledged his development, but made it crystal clear that the Browns would explore all options, internal and external, at the quarterback position. He even emphasized that the new head coach would have significant input into the decision. On paper, this sounds like a GM keeping all doors open, but here's where the story takes a dramatic turn. Just hours after Berry's press conference, CBS Sports NFL insider Jonathan Jones dropped a bombshell report that completely reframed the entire narrative. According to Jones's sources within the organization, the Cleveland Browns are preparing for Shedeur Sanders to be their starting quarterback in 2026. Not competing for the job, not battling it out in training camp, preparing for him to be the starter. This wasn't speculation. This wasn't a hot take. This was insider information from people close to the decision-making process, and it painted a wildly different picture than what Berry had just told the media. So what's going on here? Why the disconnect between Berry's public comments and what's actually happening behind closed doors? Let's connect the dots, because this is one of the most fascinating chess matches in the NFL right now. First, let's revisit Shedeur Sanders' journey to this moment, because understanding where he came from makes this development even more remarkable. Sanders entered the 2025 NFL Draft as one of the most polarizing quarterback prospects in recent memory. The son of NFL Hall of Famer Deion Sanders, Shedeur and put up absolutely elite numbers at Colorado: 14,327 passing yards, 134 touchdowns, and a 70.1 completion percentage over 4 years. He won the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year award in his final season and was widely projected to be a first-round pick, with many analysts having him in the top 10. But then, draft day happened, and Sanders fell, and fell, and fell some more. Round 1 came and went. Round 2, nothing. By the time the third round started, the football world was in disbelief. Quarterbacks like Cam Ward, Jackson Dart, Tyler Show, Jalen Milroe, and Dillon Gabriel all heard their names called before Sanders. Finally, in the fifth round, with the 144th overall pick, the Cleveland Browns traded up with the Seattle Seahawks to select him. It was one of the most stunning draft day slides in NFL history. The Browns already had Dillon Gabriel, whom they drafted in the third round, making Sanders their second quarterback of the draft and potentially their fourth-string option behind veteran Joe Flacco and the rehabbing Deshaun Watson. Nobody expected Sanders to see the field in 2025, let alone become a serious candidate for the starting job in 2026. But then, the season unfolded in the most chaotic way possible. Joe Flacco started the first 4 games, struggled, and was eventually traded to the Cincinnati Bengals. Dillon Gabriel took over, started 6 games, went 1-5, and then suffered a concussion against the Ravens in Week 11. That opened the door for Sanders, who made his NFL debut in the second half of that game. And on the same day Sanders was thrust into action, masked burglars broke into his home and stole $200,000 worth of goods. Talk about a baptism for fire. Despite all of that chaos, Sanders won his first start the following week against the Las Vegas Raiders. The Browns kept him in the lineup for the remainder of the season, and over 7 starts, Sanders went 3-4. His statistics were far from spectacular: 56.6% completion, 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. His passer rating of 68.1 ranked near the bottom of the league. He was sacked frequently, struggled with pocket awareness, and threw costly interceptions. But here's the thing, and this is critical to understanding why the Browns are now reportedly preparing for him to start in 2026. Sanders also showed flashes of brilliance that made the organization believe he has legitimate franchise quarterback potential. In Week 14 against the Tennessee Titans, Sanders threw for 364 yards and 3 touchdowns, adding a rushing score. He displayed accuracy, arm talent, and the ability to extend plays with his feet. In the season finale against the Cincinnati Bengals, with the game on the line and Kevin Stefanski's job hanging in the balance, Sanders led a clutch game-winning drive to set up the walk-off field goal. That composure, that poise in a pressure situation is what separates developmental projects from potential franchise quarterbacks. And that's when things started shifting internally. According to Jonathan Jones's sources, as the season progressed and Sanders continued to start, the Browns began to see something they hadn't seen in years: a young quarterback with upside who could actually develop into the answer. Remember, Cleveland has cycled through 13 different starting quarterbacks since Kevin Stefanski arrived in 2020. That's an NFL record. The organization is desperate for stability, and Sanders, despite his flaws, represents something the Browns haven't had in a long time: a young quarterback on a team-friendly contract with legitimate potential. Now let's talk about the financial and draft realities that are driving this decision, because this isn't just about Sanders' performance. The Browns hold the 6th overall pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, plus another first-rounder acquired from the Jacksonville Jaguars. On the surface, that sounds like the perfect opportunity to draft a quarterback. The top 2 prospects, Indiana's Fernando Mendoza and Oregon's Dante Moore, are both expected to go in the top 5. Potentially 1-2. But here's the problem. The Browns won their final 2 games of the season, which pushed them down the draft order. They're now sitting at 6th overall, which likely puts them out of range for the elite quarterback prospects without trading up aggressively. And that's where Sanders' momentum really picks up steam. Trading up for a quarterback would cost the Browns significant draft capital, potentially both first-round picks, plus additional assets. That would gut their ability to address the offensive line, which is aging and in desperate need of reinforcement, and the wide receiver position, where they have one of the worst groups in the NFL. If the Browns believe Sanders can be the guy with better weapons and protection around him, why spend all that capital on another unproven rookie when they already have one with a year of NFL experience under his belt? Jonathan Jones specifically noted in his report that the Browns are hoping to build around Sanders and get better results in year 2.
This is a critical detail. It suggests the organization has internally acknowledged that Sanders' struggles in 2025 were partly due to the terrible supporting cast. The Browns ranked 31st in scoring offense, averaging just 16.4 points per game. Their completion percentage as a team was the worst in the league, at 57.9%. Their quarterback rating was 69.9, dead last. Sanders was working with one of the NFL's worst offensive lines, a receiving corps that couldn't create separation, and minimal practice reps before being thrown into action. The fact that he won 3 games and showed flashes of elite play despite all of that is actually remarkable when you break it down. And here's where the story gets even more interesting. According to Jonathan Jones's sources, the Browns are aware that their head coaching search is going to be complicated by this quarterback decision. Any coach they hire will need to believe in Sanders and believe in the front office's ability to deliver on offensive line and wide receiver acquisitions. Jones specifically reported that sources have told him candidates with options may not have the Browns high on their list because of concerns about both the quarterback situation and the front office's track record. This is a massive problem for Cleveland. They need to hire a coach who can develop Sanders, but the best coaching candidates, guys like Ravens offensive coordinator Monken, Bills offensive coordinator Joe Brady, Chiefs offensive coordinator Matt Nagy, might look at the Browns situation and decide it's not worth the risk. If the Browns can't land a top-tier offensive mind to work with Sanders, the entire plan falls apart. And that's why Andrew Berry's public comments were so carefully worded. He can't commit to Sanders publicly because it might scare off coaching candidates who want their own quarterback. But internally, the organization is preparing for Sanders to be the guy because the draft, cap, and roster realities make it the most logical path forward.
Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, Deshaun Watson. Berry confirmed that Watson, who missed the entire 2025 season recovering from a torn Achilles, is expected to be on the roster in 2026. Watson is 30 years old, coming off his second Achilles surgery, and has been an unmitigated disaster since arriving in Cleveland. He's played just 19 games over 3 seasons, posted a 33.1 total QBR, which would rank dead last among qualifying quarterbacks this season, and is owed a fully guaranteed $230 million contract. Owner Jimmy Haslam publicly called the Watson trade a swing and miss, the first time anyone in the organization admitted what everyone already knew. But here's the thing. Watson's contract is essentially unmovable. The Browns restructured it multiple times, pushing money into future years, and now they're stuck with cap hits totaling more than $53 million between 2027 and 29, 3 years after his contract expires. Trading him is impossible. Cutting him would be a financial disaster. So Watson will be on the roster in 2026, but based on all the reporting, he's not expected to be in the mix to start. He's an $80.7 million third-string quarterback, which is insane, but that's the reality Cleveland created for itself. So if Watson isn't starting, and the Browns are preparing for Sanders to start, what about Dillon Gabriel? Gabriel, the third-round pick, started 6 games, went 1-5, and posted an 80.8 passer rating before getting hurt. He's under contract for 2026 and will likely be in the competition, but all signs point to Sanders being the frontrunner. Gabriel had his chance and didn't seize it. Sanders, despite worse statistics, showed more upside and won more games. And then there's Mel Kiper Jr., ESPN's legendary draft analyst, who has become Shedeur Sanders' biggest defender in the entire football universe. Kiper ranked Sanders as his #1 quarterback prospect ahead of the 2025 draft and went on an iconic rant when Sanders fell to the 5th round, calling NFL teams clueless for 50 years when it comes to evaluating quarterbacks. After Sanders' rocky rookie season, Kiper doubled down, saying, "I don't know what else the kid needs to do. Everything about Shedeur Sanders screams he's the quarterback." Kiper passionately defended Sanders on ESPN's First Draft podcast this week, arguing that people were being unfair in their evaluations.
He pointed out that many of Sanders' interceptions were tipped passes, batted balls, or drops by receivers, things that inflate the stat sheet but don't reflect poorly on the quarterback. He emphasized that Sanders had 0 training camp reps with the first team, was thrown into brutal weather conditions, and still managed to lead game-winning drives and show growth. Kiper even compared Sanders to Josh Allen, noting that Allen had haters in years 2 and 3, so Sanders avoiding criticism was impossible. Kiper's endorsement matters because he has credibility in evaluating quarterbacks, and his public support adds to the momentum Sanders is building. When one of the most respected voices in draft analysis is saying Sanders deserves the starting job, it gives the Browns organizational cover to commit to him. But let's be real about the challenges ahead. If Sanders is going to be the starter in 2026, the Browns must invest heavily on the offense, and Andrew Berry knows it. Berry said the offense will receive significant investment this offseason, and with approximately $69 million in salary cap space and 10 draft picks, including 2 first-rounders, he has the resources to make it happen. The Browns need to rebuild the offensive line, bring in legitimate wide receivers, and create an environment where Sanders can succeed. But the problem is, if the new head coach doesn't believe in Sanders, or if the Browns can't attract top offensive talent in free agency in the draft, this entire plan collapses. Sanders will be set up to fail, the organization will waste another year, and the cycle will continue. And that brings us back to Jonathan Jones' report and why it's so significant. By revealing that the Browns are preparing for Sanders to start, Jones gave us a glimpse into the internal thinking that contradicts Berry's public posture. Berry has to say the quarterback position is up for grabs because he needs flexibility in the coaching search and doesn't want to handcuff the new hire. But the reality, according to sources close to the situation, is that Sanders has already won the internal battle. The draft board doesn't favor a quarterback. The cap situation doesn't allow for a big free agent signing. Watson isn't a viable option. Gabriel didn't prove himself. Sanders, despite his flaws, is the best option the Browns have, and the organization is quietly preparing for him to be the guy. This is a major shift from where things stood just a few weeks ago. Early in the season, Sanders was an afterthought, buried on the depth chart. Now he's the centerpiece of the Browns' 2026 plans, even if Andrew Berry won't say it out loud yet. The momentum is undeniable. Sanders is gaining serious traction, and barring a major surprise in free agency or the draft, he's going to be Cleveland's starting quarterback when the 2026 season kicks off.
The question now is whether the Browns can execute the rest of the plan. Can they hire the right coach? Can they fix the offensive line? Can they bring in weapons? Can they create an environment where Sanders can thrive? Because if they can't, this entire momentum shift will have been for nothing, and Cleveland will be right back where they've been for the past 25 years, searching for a franchise quarterback. So here's where we stand. Andrew Berry publicly refused to commit to Shedeur Sanders, but behind the scenes, the Cleveland Browns are preparing for him to be their starting quarterback in 2026. This represents a massive shift in the franchise's thinking and signals that despite Sanders' flaws, the organization believes he has the potential to be the long-term answer. The next few months will determine whether this gamble pays off or becomes another chapter in Cleveland's long, painful quarterback saga. As always, this information is based on insider reports, public statements, and ongoing developments. The situation is fluid, and the Browns' plans could change depending on coaching hires, free agency, and the draft. We'll continue to monitor this story closely and bring you updates as they happen.